Hello and welcome to our Edge Sports and Football Outsiders Championship Sunday preview. I'm Ian O'Connor, and as usual, I'm joined by Edge Sports co-founder Frank Frigo, Football Outsiders editor-in-chief Aaron Schatz, and Edge Sports senior data scientist Scott Brown. The NFL Conference Championships are upon us, and there's really no surprise among the four remaining teams fighting for a Super Bowl berth. Both games are rematches from the regular season, and all four teams are among the league's top six. All four of our Edge Sports favorites won last week, but even some of the close games weren't really all that close, were they, Aaron?
Yeah, according to DVOA, there was actually a big gap between the winning team and the losing team in all four games, even though some of the scores were closer. I think what was most interesting about last week is there's this narrative that Kansas City has not actually been trying over the last 2 months and that they were going to flip the switch in the playoffs. And there's some evidence for that because the first half of the game against Cleveland, they had an offensive DVOA over 70%. It was the best half of offensive football that they've played all year. Obviously, things declined a lot. In the second half, they had one bad drive, then Mahomes got hurt, and Hetty came in, and then they had a couple of bad drives until they finally converted at the end. The other thing I'll point out from the divisional round is Buffalo finally had a bad game on offense. Their defense was strong enough against Baltimore to win the game overall, but they didn't have a strong offensive game. But I think they'll bounce back from that in the conference championship.
Yeah, and a big part of this weekend was coaching decisions again. But contrary to last week, we had a lot of aggressive fourth down decisions this weekend. And as we anticipated, the Cleveland-Kansas City game saw a number of fourth down goes, but also one costly fourth down error. Frank, can you tell us about those last few minutes in Kansas City between Kevin Stefanski and Andy Reid?
Yeah, so there was a very controversial choice, which would surprise a lot of our listeners, that we had Cleveland committing a pretty substantial error on that 4th and 9 with a little over 4 minutes left in the game. This defies all conventional wisdom, right? You've got 9 yards to a first down. There's 4 minutes remaining in the game. Kansas City has a backup quarterback. But when we ran this through a custom simulation, we show that it's about 5%, very close to 5% in game winning chance that was left on the table. And even when we went back and sort of retested some of the different assumptions, obviously accounting for the difference on Kansas City's offense, it still seems to hold that there's a pretty compelling argument here that Cleveland should have gotten very aggressive and attempted this and tried to keep possession.
Yeah, but as it turned out, they never got the ball back. That's because Andy Reid made that great decision on 4th and 1. Like you said, with Chad Henne, it was actually set up by a 13-yard scramble by him. So he did a great job, and Reid didn't even hesitate. He kept that offense on the field. And then in the night game between the Bucs and the Saints, we saw what we expected for the most part. Now, while Bruce Arians did make a great decision to go for it on 4th and 1 from his own 34, he punted on 4th and 1 from the Saints' 8 on the same drive, and then from his own 34 about a quarter later. The defense was the talk of the game in Tampa Bay's victory, of course, with 4 turnovers. But those mistakes could cost Arians the NFC's number 1 seed against the NFC's number 1 seed this weekend. So we'll see how that one goes. And speaking of the NFC's number 1 seed, we'll begin with Sunday's first game, the NFC Championship game between the Buccaneers and Packers at Lambeau Field. Now, the Buccaneers may be used to playing their home games in the Florida sunshine, but Tom Brady's no stranger to those cold weather playoff games. So we saw Aaron Rodgers and the Packers put up nearly 500 yards and 32 points on the Rams' top-ranked defense last week. But like I mentioned, we saw the Buccaneers' top 6 defense force 4 turnovers against the Saints. So Green Bay's worst offensive performance of the season came back in their 38-10 blowout loss in Week 6 in Tampa Bay. And that game was also Tampa Bay's best defensive performance of the season. So Aaron, surely you don't expect a repeat performance like we saw with Green Bay and San Francisco last season in an NFC Championship game rematch, right?
No, I don't. I mean, last season was a bit of an exception to the rule that in general, you learn more from the full season of how a team plays than you do from one rematch. Even if it played that opponent once in the regular season, you may learn a little bit about what kind of strategies and personnel groupings a team wants to try, but I don't think that suddenly Tampa Bay is going to beat Green Bay by 28 again. I mean, these are 2 of the top 3 teams right now in weighted DVOA. The top 2 offenses, Green Bay is about 8 percentage points better than Tampa Bay on offense, but Tampa Bay is about 8 percentage points better than Green Bay on defense, so these teams are really neck and neck.
Yeah, and we saw Tampa Bay do the same thing last week against New Orleans. They were beaten in 2 games, I believe, almost 50 points to the Saints, and they come out and beat the Saints by 10 points. So you never really know what's going to happen in the NFL. And Frank, I mentioned Bruce Arians' inconsistency last week in New Orleans when it comes to those fourth down decisions. He did have 3 of the top 5 errors of the week, totaling 10.3% pre-snap win probability loss. Meanwhile, Matt LaFleur had only 2 very small errors against Los Angeles. So last week we asked this question about Sean Payton, but do you think Bruce Arians will be more aggressive this week against Green Bay and a coach like LaFleur, or will he stick with conventional wisdom on those fourth downs?
He's been unpredictable, but we had him in our critical call index. He was ranked 30th, where LaFleur, who was our coach of the year, was third in our CCI, our critical call index. So it appears going into this game, this is a pretty clear distinction between these two coaches. Arians might surprise us, but I would expect he'll probably perform and make decisions like he's shown us he likes to make them during the course of the season. And this is a pretty distinct advantage to LaFleur in my view. And, if it's a tight game, it could really make a difference.
Yeah, and even with a quarterback like Tom Brady, if you take him off the field, there's not much he can do for you there. So we'll see how that turns out this week for Arians. And then Scott, there's not as much uncertainty for Green Bay's game this week regarding player availability like there was last week, although Wolford was ruled out for the Rams. We knew Goff was going to play. But I imagine this game is much closer than last week's game for Green Bay as far as the spread goes.
Yeah, that's right, Ian. So depending on the book that you're looking at, Green Bay is favored by either 3 or 3.5 points. As we've alluded to in the past, there's quite a significant difference between those two lines. But in this case, our model likes Tampa Bay regardless. So we like Tampa Bay getting either 3 or 3.5 points. We do think it's significantly better if you can get that 3.5, but you should feel pretty comfortable taking Tampa Bay side regardless. The total for this game is 51 points. We actually like the over as it stands. Our model doesn't take into account weather, and looking ahead to the weather report at Lambeau, it appears there could be a chance of snow and some cold weather as well. So that's something to keep an eye on. We're a little bit less confident about our liking the over on the total, but that gives you a pretty good look at what we're thinking heading into this game.
And you mentioned the weather, so it could be some snow up there in Green Bay. And it's always fun to watch snow football, especially in the postseason. And now coming to perhaps the most anticipated rematch of the season that we've been looking forward to for quite a while and kind of expecting is the AFC Championship between the Buffalo Bills and Kansas City Chiefs. So unless you live under a rock, chances are you've heard about the question mark at quarterback for Kansas City heading into Sunday night. Not only is Patrick Mahomes in the NFL's concussion protocol, but he looked like he was dealing with some sort of leg injury prior to his exit against the Browns. Aaron, you mentioned Kansas City and their ability to kind of flip the switch come playoffs. So how are you seeing things for this rematch?
Well, if Henne starts, obviously Buffalo needs to be the clear favorites. If Mahomes starts, I think we should go based on the idea that Mahomes is going to start. It's much closer than people realize because, listen, the question really is, Kansas City, does their 2020 performance matter, or do we just throw that out and say, we believe that Kansas City is the best, they were the best last year, they were the best 2 years ago, so what happened over the last 4 months doesn't matter, they're the best. And, all of the research I've ever done says you don't take the last 4 months of football and throw them out. And that what Buffalo has done over the last 4 months and what Kansas City has done over the last 4 months matters. And the fact is that over the last 4 months, and especially over the last 2 months, Buffalo has been the better team of these two teams. Kansas City is third in weighted offensive DVOA, but Buffalo is fourth. And on defense, Kansas City is 22nd, while Buffalo is 8th. So, Buffalo is just a much better, more well-rounded team. Not much better, but they're a more well-rounded team and a slightly better team. They're being better on defense and special teams sort of negates Kansas City's being better on offense because Kansas City is not, based on how they've played this year, is not miles and miles ahead of Buffalo. And the reason why is it's not the same offense as the last 2 years because the offensive line is different. And the offensive line is not playing as well as it did the last 2 years. So there's reason to believe that perhaps Kansas City is not as good as what we saw in 2018 and 2019.
Like we saw and you mentioned with the Tampa Bay Green Bay game, Kansas City won this one in the regular season. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to win it again, just like you said, because Buffalo has just been better overall since that game. And I know you've also looked at some different scenarios regarding Mahomes' health and that Chiefs offense as a whole. And with the concussion protocols, it's not like he can tough it out and play through it like any other injury. We haven't really talked much about Super Bowl odds on this before, especially now that we're in the playoffs, only a handful of teams left. But I imagine things change perhaps quite a bit depending on what happens at quarterback for Kansas City. Is that right?
Right. If Mahomes starts this week, we are giving Kansas City a 23% chance of winning the Super Bowl. So again, because we are counting what they did in 2020 and accounting for that, we are behind what Vegas gives for Kansas City's odds because they have Kansas City as the favorite. If Henne starts this week, their odds of winning the Super Bowl drop to 13%, which actually may not be as big a drop as people expect because the offense was okay with Henne in Week 17, and it didn't have Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and a couple of offensive linemen, and those guys will all play even if Mahomes can't. Now, the difference is if you think that Kansas City's offense is secretly, actually, as good as it was 2 years ago when it was the third best offense ever tracked by DVOA, then Kansas City's odds of winning the Super Bowl improve from 23% to 29%. But even still, if that's the case, I think we have them a little overvalued by Vegas. I think Vegas is just Green Bay's offense has been that good this year, actually. Green Bay's offense has been almost as good as what Kansas City's was 2 years ago. So even if Kansas City's offense is better than what they look like, it's as good as Green Bay's offense and almost, a little bit better than Tampa Bay's offense. Like all the teams that are left have really good offenses.
Yeah, so it seems like a lot of it, or pretty much all of it, hinges, on who's in the quarterback. If Mahomes is able to play, which makes sense. Obviously, he's one of the best young quarterbacks, one of the best quarterbacks in the league right now. So it'll be interesting to follow that this week and see if he's able to end up being active and play on Sunday. And now, Frank, once again this week, Andy Reid matches up with a coach that finished pretty high in our coach rankings. Now, Sean McDermott did have a couple errors on fourth and medium around midfield last week, but he's been pretty aggressive over the course of the season. And we mentioned Reid's great late game decision earlier, though he also had one of our top 5 errors last week on a 4th and 1 field goal. Now, sometimes we see these coaches clam up in big games. We talk about it all the time. So what are you expecting between these two coaches on Sunday?
Well, they both ranked pretty well in our CCI throughout the season. I think, as you've mentioned, Andy Reid sort of showed his cards at the end of the game, even with Chad Henne in there, that he was going to follow the analytics and do something sound. We supported that decision. So I don't see a clear advantage here, but I would not expect Reid to back off in this game. I think he'll sort of follow, the math and do what he needs to do in the right situations.
And you think even with Chad Henne, like you said, it didn't change anything at the end of that game, but perhaps in the beginning of a game with a lot more to play, you think he'll stick to his guns and be pretty aggressive?
Yeah, I mean, you could argue it either way, right? That he may feel like he needs to take more chances, or perhaps there's more of a surprise element, like there was at the end of the last game. So it wouldn't surprise me to see him, stay the course of aggression, even with Henne in there.
Yeah, and he's been number 2 in our coach rankings the last 2 years, and as we saw last year in the Super Bowl, he didn't let up in the biggest of stages in the Super Bowl. He definitely outcoached Kyle Shanahan last year. So he's not scared to do it when it matters most. And Scott, we saw a similar situation with the Rams game a few weeks ago regarding Jared Goff, if he was going to be able to play. And I'd imagine Mahomes is worth quite a bit more than him. So what have you seen so far this week, or at least just in the few days with this being Tuesday? What are the betting markets looking like for this game?
That's right, Ian. So depending on which book you're looking at, we have some differences once again. Kansas City is currently favored by 2.5 in some spots or 3 points in others. As you alluded to, Patrick Mahomes is going to be worth quite a bit. So depending on any news that comes out this week, the line's liable to break one way or the other. If he's going to play, it should break even further in Kansas City's direction. We would expect them to be favored by maybe closer to 7 points or even more. And we also have the possibility that if he's out and Henne will start for Kansas City, that Buffalo could be favored in this matchup. Looking at our model, it actually doesn't matter, we don't think it matters all too much. We like Buffalo's side pretty much in a variety of scenarios. So that's a very interesting thing to point out. As Aaron had alluded to earlier, Buffalo has really been coming on strong. They're the number 1 team in weighted DVOA. So we really like their side in this matchup. Currently, the total stands at 53 points. And the model likes the over for this particular betting line. Once again, we'd like to advise some caution in taking this advice. There's some elements at play. We saw last week in Buffalo in an outdoor environment that the kicking games for both teams struggled. In Kansas City, it looks like there's a potential for precipitation, on Sunday, so that could affect things as well, which we would expect lower the expectation of scoring in that game. So that's what that one looks like going into this weekend. We do like Buffalo in this matchup.
Evan, sounds like either way, we should be, we're at the conference championship level of the season. We should be expecting a couple great games in both time slots on Sunday. And now, once again, it's time for us to make our predictions as to who will be playing in Raymond James Stadium on February 7th. So, Aaron, do you expect Aaron Rodgers to get to his elusive second Super Bowl, or will Tom Brady and the Bucs get to play the Super Bowl in their home stadium?
I do think that Green Bay is rightly favored. They are the slightly better team. And while I would take Tampa Bay with the points, especially if you can get 3.5 instead of 3, I would take Green Bay to win this game.
Frank?
Yeah, so I'm going to lean on Green Bay here. I think Green Bay is a favorite to win. I think they should cover. I think there's a clear distinction between these two coaches. And I'm always a little bit leery of the Brady Superman effect, that the market is pumping up Tampa Bay a little bit because Brady can do no wrong in these situations. And maybe that's true. We'll find out. But I would lean towards Green Bay in this one.
And I'm with Aaron on this one. I like Tampa Bay taking the points, but I like Green Bay straight up to win the game.
I'm going to go back with Frank, and I'm going to stick with my Super Bowl pick of Green Bay to win it and to beat the spread in this one. And then now on to the AFC Championship we just covered a minute ago. Will the Bills finally get back to the big one, or will Kansas City represent the AFC for the second consecutive season?
I'm going to be counterintuitive, and I'm going to go Buffalo. Our numbers just feel like Buffalo has been the better team, especially over the last 2 to 3 months. And, when you add in the question mark about Mahomes' health, that just gives you a little bit tiny push, a little bit more towards Buffalo. But I think even if Mahomes is healthy, Buffalo is they're a better all-around team, even if Kansas City is better on offense.
Yeah, there's a pretty compelling case there for Buffalo, and you guys have made it. I picked Kansas City for the Super Bowl champ early on. I think I'm going to still stay there. Obviously, knock on wood, we'll see if Mahomes plays. That's a huge difference, but I'm gonna stay on Kansas City to win the game. But I think you'd have to lean toward Buffalo on the spread here.
And I like Buffalo both taking the points and to win the game outright. They're coming unstrung at the right time.
And I'm going to take Kansas City against the spread and straight up. I think they're going to come out and make it to the Super Bowl again. And the good thing is with both of these games is they'll be in stadiums where there will be fans. And these are two of the biggest home field advantages, if there still is home field advantage in the NFL, especially this season. But those fans that are going to be there, are going to be rooting hard and loud for their home teams. And that does it for our conference championship preview. So we should be in for some great action on Sunday. So guys, enjoy the games, and we'll see you back here for our Super Bowl 55 preview.